So the last 2 games I reviewed sent me into a spiral of depression and self-hatred that made me realize we're just dancing in the hand of some abstract concept of God only to be released by the cruel inevitability of death. I don't want to do that again. Let's play something stupid. Resident Evil 4 is so gosh dang diddly fucking splendid. I'm by no means a Resident Evil expert. The only games in the series I've played to the end are this one and the original. Remake. But Resident Evil 4 still ended up being one of my favorite games. It's a game that seamlessly blends horror and action, and is a great addition to the popular games that are Resident Evil 4 genre. Resident Evil 4 was also my first M-rated game. Before I played it, the most risque thing I'd played was Tales of Symphonia. Oh, don't cut yourself on that edge there, Lloyd. I only played it because one of my friends offered to lend it to me, and since my only console at the time was a Wii, I was desperate to play something that wasn't Wii Sports or Twilight Princess for the 43rd consecutive time. Now imagine being a naive, innocent 14-year-old who was raised on Donkey Kong Country and Super Mario Bros. To you, Earth is a magical place where nothing bad happens. Then Resident Evil 4 kicks down your fucking door with a chainsaw and is like, "Welcome to the real world, jackass!" Yeah, it was a fucking jarring transition to say the least. So back on the subject of the opening level, is there a more iconic opening to a game than the village scene from Resident Evil 4? That was clearly a rhetorical question. See, up to this point, the Ganados were kind of a pain to kill, but you only had to deal with 1 or 2 at a time. Well, that fucking escalated quickly. The first 3 minutes of this game are dedicated to making you feel as helpless as possible, with assholes practically coming out of the damn floorboards. How has this happened twice now? And after that fucking assault on your senses, then the title appears. The game hasn't even started yet. Normally, these kinds of levels would come later in the game when you're ready for it, but this is the game introducing itself. Battles are claustrophobic and against multiple hostiles, one of which can just drain the ever-loving cock out of your health. See, everyone debates about whether this is a horror game or an action game. The answer is yes. You're given access to a multitude of heavily upgradable guns early on that would break the game wide open, were it not for the fact that Leon's mother was a turtle and his father was a tank. It's canon. Google it. His movement is restricted, is what I'm getting at. You can only move him in one direction at a time, and you have to briefly stop to turn. This is coupled with the fact that you can't run and shoot at the same time. And in a game where enemies can do this, that can be noticeable. People hate this. They're like, oh, fuck you, Capcom, the controls murdered my wife or something. But the thing is, this was an intentional design decision. Separating movement from combat forces you to make decisions quickly. You have to decide when to stop an attack and when to run away in a tense environment. Knowing that I'm gonna have to stop moving at some point during this keeps the tension constant. This control scheme complements boss fights as well. On paper, these boss fights suck. Just hold shoot and eventually they'll die. But here they work. Bosses hit hard and your lack of fluid movement makes avoiding them difficult. So it really feels like all you can do is desperately shoot, hoping that they'll die. Suddenly having so many friggin' guns doesn't make you feel better because bosses are bullet sponges. It's a good way to give you multiple options while still keeping the spirit of a horror game. So did you know this game is actually really fucking stupid? The thing I love most about this game is that it has and embraces all the action movie cliches you could possibly want. The one-liner spewing action hero with a dark past, the distressing damsel with no personality, the comic relief sidekick who fucking dies, the femme fatale who the hero may or may not be boning, the old friend come back from the dead turned traitor who the hero may or may not be boning, the 3-villain band of the Palpatine-esque big bad, the quiet muscle, and Salazar. And while he doesn't really fit into a specific trope, the Merchant definitely deserves special mention for being the most quotable character in the game, with such gems as,
"Not enough cash, stranger."
So at one point you make it to the Church of the Magical Vibrating Chandelier, where we're introduced to our main antagonist, Sadler. Good God, I love Sadler. But this bothers me. He injects you with the Ganado parasite. Okay, he wants to control you, that makes sense. But then he immediately sends someone to kill you. What? Okay, maybe he accidentally injected you with the parasite. Okay, that'll be our theory for now. But then no, because later on he says,
"When the eggs hatch, you will become my puppets. Involuntarily, you'll do as I say. I'll have total control over your minds."
Okay, so now you're back to wanting to control me. But then immediately afterwards, his henchmen come packing heat. Because because they're flaming arrows. It's funny. I'm funny. Okay, that was clearly not a warning shot, so I'm gonna assume you're trying to kill me again. And Salazar kind of backs this up.
You can die.
But then, because of course we're not done yet, are we? Later, way later, he says,
When your assimilation with Las Plagas is complete, I'll have you serve as my guard.
motherfucker, do you want to kill me or not? Somewhat related, let's talk about the castle stage because it's the greatest fucking thing ever made. Up to this point, the game has kind of been riding the line between campy action and survival horror. But the castle stage just comes up and says, you know what, first third of the game? Love what you're doing here. Digging the subtlety. But what if we put a little Napoleon-esque child with a shrill voice in there? You know, he and Leon can drop one-liners on each other.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
You know those creepy Ganados that are legitimately unsettling? How about we give them motherfucking rocket launchers and a Gatling gun? Sky's the limit when you're high as fuck. What if some of the enemies just had big-ass Wolverine claws? The acid-spitting bugs, of course, go without saying. And hear me out on this one. This game was made by human beings. Well, there's no avoiding this blonde elephant in the room anymore, is there? She's not as bad as people say. Yeah, she keeps up with you, she'll do what she's told without complaint, and protecting her always felt like a natural expansion of the survivalist gameplay, because now that you've learned to fend for yourself, you have to defend someone else. She follows you so closely that it's basically like you're controlling both of them at once. Hearing her shriek when she gets captured is always annoying, but it also felt like a fair punishment for me letting her get grabbed. Plus, whenever escorting her felt like it was overstaying its welcome, giant moth. You probably think I'm leaving something out, but I'm not. You only really have to escort her for like 25% of the game's total runtime, which made me kind of wonder why they bothered programming her into the game in the first place. There's actually a segment later on where you play as Ashley and the game becomes more of a traditional survival horror game. And I think this segment actually perfectly surmises what Ashley is. It's short, annoying, has no business being in the game whatsoever, and is just screaming for Leon to come back. By the way, just Google this, no one can hold it against you. In the end, I didn't mind Ashley's inclusion all that much. Now, the ideal way to do an escort mission is not at all, but you could do worse. You could do better, but some people will tell you this game runs out of steam towards the last third of its runtime. Tell that to my friend Reggie. Fuck these things. They refuse to die. They keep regenerating. Finding their weak point is a goddamn chore. You never know if you're actually hurting them. And that fucking breathing. Oh, and sometimes they have spikes. Fuck you. Other than that, I have to admit the last third is not as memorable as the first two. I think when I was shooting Ganados from the back of a truck and had to take down a pursuing truck only for it to explode and come back to life and I was fighting a flaming truck, the game had somewhat jumped the shark. To be honest, even the world's greatest metal band isn't so intimidating when you have the thermal scope. What is this? This is Operation? Stick to the script, mate. The final boss also won't give you any trouble if you've even looked at a Zelda game. Oh, I wonder where to shoot. How about that jet ski segment? I mean, I've already beaten the final boss. At this point, you're holding me hostage. I mean, this level still has its moments, though.
What do you intend to do restoring Umbrella?
To bring order and balance to this insane world of ours.
A psycho like you can't bring order or balance.
Earth is a beautiful place. For all intents and purposes, this is a good level. Fuck! Okay, I lied. Everything is terrible and we're all going to die. But this is still a great game. It's an intense action horror game with just the right amount of self-awareness. While it does have its flaws, it's still a game I find myself coming back to years after my initial playthrough. Anything I can complain about really doesn't detract from the fact that this game is a masterpiece. I mean, if I had to nitpick, the fishing minigame leaves a bit to be desired. Oh, and, happy late Halloween, I guess.